My parents dragged me into court because I bought a house with my own money, all because they claimed it belonged to my sister. I wish I were exaggerating. Stay with me as I tell you everything, and if this story reaches your heart, I'd truly appreciate your support through a like, a share, or even a follow. It helps more than you know. My name is Marley Thornwell, I'm 27, and I've always been the quiet, dependable one. Growing up in rural Pennsylvania with my parents, Nadine Thornwell and Clive Thornwell, meant learning early what control felt like. They made every decision for me, what I wore, who I talked to, even how long I could sit in my own room. But none of that applied to my younger sister, Harlow Thornwell. She was the golden child from the moment she could walk. If she cried, I was blamed. If she wanted something, everyone rushed. And when she made mistakes, I was the one expected to fix them. When I turned 18, I left. I packed a bag, took a bus to another city, and promised myself I wouldn't go back unless I chose to. I worked 2 jobs, morning shifts at a small cafe and evenings stocking shelves. It was exhausting, but for the first time in my life, my time belonged to me. For years, I saved every dollar I could. No shopping sprees, no vacations, nothing extra. Just long days, long nights, and a quiet dream of owning a place where I could finally breathe. And when I turned 27, I did it. I bought a small, cozy house in upstate New York. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. Mine in a way nothing had ever been before. I had barely finished painting the living room when my parents showed up at my doorstep. No warning, no congratulations. Just anger. Real sharp anger. My mother's first words were, "How could you steal what was meant for your sister?" I laughed because I honestly thought they were joking. But their faces didn't move. They stood there, accusing me of taking something that was promised to Harlow, my house, the one I paid for with my own money. I told them they must have misunderstood, but they wouldn't calm down. They said the family had an agreement, one I apparently broke. An agreement I had never heard of in my entire life. Before I could make sense of what they were saying, my father handed me an envelope. Inside were legal papers. They were suing me. My own parents were taking me to court to force me to transfer my house to my sister. In that moment, my chest felt tight, like the air had been sucked out of the world. I wasn't just hurt, I was shattered. I had worked for years alone for something they believed they had the right to take. And that was only the beginning. Marley didn't sleep for days after being served with the lawsuit. Her hands shook every time she looked at the papers, but she forced herself to stay calm. She needed help, real help, not the kind her parents pretended to offer. So she hired a lawyer named Grant Ellery, a sharp, steady man who read through the complaint twice before looking up at her with wide eyes. "This is unbelievable," he said. "They're suing you for a house you bought yourself? With your own income? None of this makes sense." Marley felt a mix of embarrassment and relief. At least someone else finally saw how absurd her parents could be. As they talked through the details, memories began to flood her mind. Flashbacks she never wanted to revisit. She remembered being 12, stuck babysitting Harlow Thornwell every weekend while her friends went to parties. She remembered wiping tables at the family diner after school, not even allowed to keep the tips customers slipped her. Her parents, Nadine Thornwell and Clive Thornwell, always said the same thing. Family helps family. But somehow, family always meant Marley helping everyone else. Now, those same parents were calling relatives and twisting the story. Word spread fast. Cousins and aunts began messaging Marley, telling her they heard she stole a house meant for her sister, accusing her of being selfish and cold. Her parents painted her as ungrateful, claiming they had sacrificed so much for her, only for her to betray the family. Marley felt sick. She knew her parents loved playing victim, but she never imagined they'd drag her name through the mud like this. During legal discovery, Grant uncovered something even worse. Her parents had planned for years to give a house to Harlow. They had documents, emails, even old notes discussing it. But not once in her entire life had they told Marley this plan existed. They never asked her opinion. They just assumed she would somehow make it happen. Then Marley found the journals, old notebooks her mother kept. And inside were entries that made Marley's stomach twist. Marley is responsible. She will support Harlow's success. That's her role. Her role. As if she had been born to serve her sister. As if her dreams, her work, her life didn't matter. When Marley confronted Harlow, her sister didn't even try to hide her arrogance. Harlow leaned back, crossed her arms, and smirked. "You'll get tired of fighting," she whispered confidently. "You always do. Just sign the house over. It was supposed to be mine anyway." The words hit Marley like a punch. For the first time, she saw her sister clearly, not as a spoiled favorite, but as someone who truly believed Marley existed for her benefit. And in that moment, something inside Marley shifted. This lawsuit wasn't about property. It wasn't about a house. It was about power, about control, about keeping Marley in the same old cage she had escaped years ago. They wanted to break her, but she wasn't going to let them. The first court appearance felt unreal to Marley. She sat beside her lawyer, Grant Ellery, while her parents acted like they were the victims. Nadine Thornwell spoke first, pretending to wipe tears, claiming Marley had used family funds to buy her house. Then Clive Thornwell stepped in, insisting they had helped Marley financially for years and that the home was always meant for Harlow Thornwell. Marley's stomach twisted, but she stayed quiet until it was her turn. When the judge asked her to respond, she opened a folder she had prepared with shaking hands. Inside were months and months of proof. Every paycheck, every overtime shift she worked, every bank deposit, every receipt from the cafe and the store where she had worked for years. She had nothing to hide, and Grant presented the documents clearly and calmly. "This is independent income," Grant explained. Not a single dollar traces back to her parents. Not one. Her parents shifted uncomfortably. Their confident expressions slipped for the first time. Grant didn't stop there. He began pointing out every contradiction in their claims. One moment, her parents swore they had helped Marley build her future. The next, they said they had barely been involved. Their timeline didn't match. Their explanations fell apart the more questions the judge asked. Marley watched them struggle to defend their lies, but the damage was already spreading outside the courtroom. People in their hometown began whispering. Some believed Marley and applauded her for finally standing up. Others sided with her parents, spreading rumors that Marley had abandoned her family and stolen what wasn't hers. It felt like the whole community had been forced to choose a side. Then came the worst blow yet. Grant called Marley late one evening, his voice unusually tense. "They submitted a letter," he said. "A supposed letter of intent from you, stating you promised the house to Harlow." Marley felt the blood drain from her face. "I never wrote anything like that." "I know," Grant said. "This letter is forged. The signature doesn't match, and the formatting is inconsistent. We'll prove it." She wanted to scream. How far were they willing to go? How much more could they twist her life? Grant started digging into her parents' finances next. He suspected there was more behind their desperation. Marley didn't know what he would find, but the idea of her parents being involved in something dishonest made her chest tighten. These were the people who had raised her, the people she had once tried so hard to please. Walking out of the courthouse that day, Marley felt crushed. Everything she had worked for, her peace, her home, her independence, was being ripped apart. But beneath the hurt, something stronger started to rise. She had spent her whole life bending to their demands. She wasn't going to bend now. She was going to fight. Marley sat across from her lawyer, Grant Ellery, as he opened a new folder thick with documents. His face was serious, almost angry. "Marley," he said quietly, "your parents are drowning in debt. Credit cards, failed loans, overdue payments, it's a lot. And it looks like they plan to use your house as collateral for a loan meant for your sister." The words hit Marley like ice water. Her house, her only safe place, was supposed to be a financial life raft for someone else. Not just someone else, but for Harlow Thornwell, who had never worked a steady job or struggled a day in her life. Grant kept going. "I also found records of Harlow's business attempts. All three of them failed. One clothing boutique, one beauty subscription idea, and a skincare line she tried to launch from your parents' diner. Every one of them lost money." Marley sat back, speechless. She had known her parents favored Harlow, but she had no idea the extent of their financial mess. She certainly never imagined they'd risk everything and drag Marley into a lawsuit just to keep Harlow afloat. The next blow came when Marley logged into an old family email account she still had access to. She wasn't even looking for trouble. She just wanted to see if there were any documents she had missed. What she found instead made her hands go cold. Email after email between her parents. Lines that read, "We can leverage Marley's stability. She has the credit score we need. Harlow deserves the house more. Marley owes the family." Owes the family. As if she hadn't spent her whole childhood cleaning tables, babysitting, giving up every part of her life to make theirs easier. When Marley confronted them during a tense legal meeting, her mother, Nadine Thornwell, didn't even deny it. She just lifted her chin and said, "We invested more in Harlow." It's only fair that you help balance things. You're the responsible one." Her father, Clive Thornwell, nodded like it was the most reasonable thing in the world. A heat rose in Marley's chest, not just anger, but a deep ache she couldn't swallow anymore. All the years she spent trying to be good enough suddenly made sense. They never wanted her to succeed for herself. They only wanted her to be useful. Marley closed the folder and met Grant's eyes. "I'm not backing down," she said firmly. Grant nodded. "Good. Because I'm filing a countersuit. Emotional damages. Financial damages. Defamation." They crossed too many lines. For the first time in weeks, Marley felt steady. Strong, even. She began making calls. Old co-workers, teachers, neighbors. Anyone who had witnessed the favoritism, the pressure, the unfair expectations placed on her since childhood. People remembered. People agreed to help. Piece by piece, Marley was building her case. They wanted to crush her, but they had no idea how determined she could be once she finally stood up for herself. The courtroom felt different the morning Marley walked in, and she couldn't explain why at first. Maybe it was the small group of people who had come to support her. Maybe it was the quiet confidence in her lawyer's expression. Or maybe it was the first witness, Marley Thornwell's former high school teacher, Elaine Reddick. Ms. Reddick stepped up to the stand and spoke with calm honesty. She explained how Marley used to come to school exhausted, how she worked late-night shifts just to stay out of the house because her parents demanded endless favors from her. She described Marley cleaning the family diner after long days of classes, all while trying to keep her grades up. Her words painted a picture Marley had always kept quietly inside. Hearing it spoken aloud, by someone who cared, made Marley's eyes sting. Next came her cousin, Jasper Yule. He was nervous, shifting from foot to foot, but his voice didn't shake. Jasper admitted he had overheard her parents many times bragging about how they would trick Marley eventually to help Harlow. He repeated the exact phrasing. The courtroom murmured. Marley's chest tightened, not from hurt this time, but from something stronger. The judge took notes. Grant whispered, "This is good." For the first time since the nightmare began, Marley felt the tide shifting. Then it was Harlow Thornwell's turn to testify. She walked in with the same smugness she always carried, but it slipped fast under pressure. When the lawyer asked her why she believed the house belonged to her, Harlow snapped. "Because it was supposed to be mine. It's my right," she burst out, her voice cracking. That moment hung in the air. The judge's eyebrows rose. The courtroom went silent. Marley watched her sister crumble under her own entitlement, and it felt like something inside Marley finally lifted. Later that afternoon, Grant showed Marley new evidence. Her parents had tried to access her bank records using false authorization. Marley felt sick. Her own parents, trying to break federal law just to take what she had earned. When this was presented in court, the judge's expression hardened. He looked directly at Marley's parents and warned them sharply about perjury, reminding them that lying under oath or manipulating financial documents would have serious consequences. They said nothing. For once they looked small. Beside her, Grant whispered, "We've got them." Marley felt a warmth spread through her chest, not happiness exactly, but strength. Real strength. The kind she had never been allowed to feel growing up. The courtroom no longer felt like a battlefield she was losing. It felt like a place where the truth was finally being heard. And as she walked out after the session ended, Marley straightened her shoulders. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel powerless. She felt powerful. The courtroom was unusually quiet the day the final decision came down. Marley sat with her lawyer, Grant Ellery, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She could feel her heart pounding, each beat echoing the months of stress, sleepless nights, and endless court appearances. The judge cleared his throat and began to speak, and Marley leaned forward instinctively. In the matter of the Thornwell property dispute, the court finds in favor of Marley Thornwell. The claims brought forth by Nadine Thornwell and Clive Thornwell are dismissed as fraudulent. Further, Ms. Thornwell's countersuit for emotional and financial damages will proceed. Marley blinked, trying to absorb the words. A strange mix of relief and disbelief washed over her. After everything, after the betrayals, the lies, the attempts to manipulate her life, she had finally won. Her parents' plan to take her home, her money, and her independence had failed. She looked toward them. Her mother's face was unreadable, her cold stare like a wall between them, while her father refused even to meet her gaze. There was no apology, no acknowledgement of the truth. Just silence and that familiar stubborn pride. Marley felt a pang of sorrow mixed with anger. This was her victory, but it didn't feel sweet yet. Harlow, standing nearby, whispered something sharp under her breath, a threat Marley heard loud and clear. "This isn't over. You'll regret this." Marley's chest tightened, but she refused to react. She had learned long ago that her sister thrived on fear and control. No amount of threats could shake her now. Outside the courtroom, Marley took a deep breath of cold air, letting it fill her lungs, steadying her racing mind. She felt victorious, yes, but also shattered. All the years of being undervalued, the constant pressure to serve everyone else, the manipulation, it weighed on her. Winning the case hadn't erased the scars. She walked slowly to her car, her steps heavy but determined. The house was finally hers, free from the shadow of her family's control. But Marley knew she needed more than just legal victories. She needed to rebuild herself, her mind, her sense of safety and peace. Over the next weeks, Marley focused on strengthening her independence. She worked on her finances, invested in her home, and surrounded herself with people who genuinely supported her. Therapy sessions became a cornerstone of her routine, helping her process the emotional manipulation she had endured for so many years. Each day, Marley felt a little stronger, a little more in control. She no longer allowed her parents' opinions to dominate her life. The fear, the guilt, the pressure, all of it began to fade. She started trusting her instincts, relying on herself, and reclaiming the person she had been before they tried to define her existence. For the first time, Marley realized she didn't need anyone's approval to live her life fully. She had survived the court, the lies, and the threats, and emerged stronger, independent, and determined to protect her peace above all else. Marley knew she didn't want to celebrate her victory by making a scene. She didn't need revenge to feel powerful, except sometimes justice had a way of arriving quietly. She remembered the diner her parents had run for years, the one where she had spent endless hours scrubbing tables, wiping counters, and cleaning dishes without pay. It had always felt like a prison, a place where her parents' favoritism and control were on full display. Now she had a chance to set things right, legally, without breaking the law herself. She spent an afternoon carefully submitting reports about the diner's violations through an anonymous legal channel. Every detail was factual: outdated health permits, unsanitary kitchen conditions, expired food items, and unsafe storage practices. Marley double-checked each point, making sure everything she reported was accurate. She didn't want to lie or exaggerate. Her goal was simply accountability. Within days, health inspectors arrived. Marley didn't watch, but the news reached her quickly. Massive issues were discovered, exactly as she had reported. The diner was temporarily shut down, forcing her parents to confront the consequences of years of negligence. Marley felt no thrill in seeing them face trouble. Instead, she felt relief. The law had spoken, and justice had been done. When her parents went public, trying to blame her for the diner's closure, Marley expected some backlash. But to her surprise, no one believed them anymore. The community had watched their manipulations unfold during the house lawsuit. Their words had lost weight, and the truth carried its own power. Marley stayed out of the drama, refusing to engage. She knew that responding would only give them the attention they craved. Back at home, Marley began to focus on herself in ways she hadn't allowed before. She painted her walls a soft, calming shade, cooked meals she loved in her own kitchen, and listened to music she had once avoided. The house, once a source of stress and conflict, became a sanctuary. Every corner reminded her that this space was hers, earned with hard work and dedication. She also began rebuilding her support system. Marley reached out to coworkers she trusted, neighbors who had always shown quiet kindness, and a few friends she had kept in touch with over the years. Slowly, a network of people who genuinely cared for her well-being began to take shape. Marley realized how much she had missed having people around who encouraged her, not demanded from her. Even small moments felt meaningful now. A neighbor waving from across the street. A coworker sharing a laugh over coffee. Marley started volunteering occasionally, not for anyone's approval, but because it brought her joy. Each day, she felt the weight of her parents' control lift a little more. Marley wasn't seeking vengeance to hurt them. She was reclaiming her peace. Quietly, legally, and with purpose, she was turning the life they had tried to control into something she owned completely. For the first time in her life, Marley was free to live on her own terms. Marley had been focusing on her own life when news about Harlow reached her. Her sister, undeterred by the court loss and their family's scrutiny, had launched yet another business venture. But this time, it was different. Marley heard whispers that Harlow had taken out questionable loans, relying on unstable credit and promises she couldn't keep. Marley didn't want to get involved, but something inside her warned that this could spiral into trouble for more than just Harlow herself. Then Marley discovered something that made her blood run cold. Harlow had tried applying for one of these loans using Marley's name. Her sister had falsified information, attempting to leverage Marley's credit and hard-earned reputation to fund her failing business. Marley felt a mix of anger and disbelief. She had escaped their manipulation years ago, yet here it was again, a reminder that Harlow and their parents were still willing to exploit her for their gain. She didn't hesitate. Marley reported the attempted identity fraud immediately. She submitted all the evidence she had, including copies of emails and documentation proving Harlow's actions. Her lawyer, Grant, helped her organize everything into a clear report. Authorities took the case seriously, and an investigation was launched. Marley stayed in contact with the investigators, providing any additional information they requested. The ripple effect was immediate. Family members who had long been loyal to Nadine and Clive began questioning their judgment. Siblings, cousins, and even aunts and uncles who had once supported Harlow started to doubt her actions. Marley noticed subtle shifts, calls she ignored, messages she declined to answer. But the distance between her and the toxic influence of her family felt healthier than ever. The family, once a tightly controlled unit of favoritism and manipulation, was now fraying under the weight of its own secrets. Marley documented everything meticulously. Every email, every message, every legal notice was saved. She knew her sister and parents could try to manipulate the story again, but this time she had irrefutable evidence. Each record she kept became a symbol of the independence she had fought so hard to achieve. As the investigation continued, Harlow's finances began to collapse. Loans went unpaid, accounts were frozen, and creditors started filing claims. The pressure mounted, and soon a court order was issued, freezing Harlow's remaining assets until the matter could be resolved. Marley felt a quiet sense of justice. It wasn't about taking pleasure in her sister's failures, but it was about seeing accountability enforced for once, something she had long been denied. For the first time, Marley truly understood how fragile the world Harlow and their parents had tried to manipulate was. The truth was powerful, and it couldn't be twisted when it was documented, verified, and backed by law. Marley continued her life, peaceful and focused, knowing that the chaos they once tried to force on her was now unraveling around them. She didn't gloat. She didn't celebrate. She simply moved forward, secure in the knowledge that justice, carefully and quietly applied, had finally reached them all. Marley woke up one morning and realized how quiet her life had become, in the best possible way. For the first time in years, she didn't feel the constant pressure of her parents' expectations or her sister's entitlement pressing down on her. She had made a choice. She would no longer respond to their calls, texts, or emails. She blocked every possible way they could contact her and removed herself from their social media accounts. It wasn't easy, but each boundary she set felt like a small, victorious step toward freedom. Therapy became a cornerstone of her new routine. Marley began unpacking years of favoritism, emotional manipulation, and subtle guilt-tripping she had endured without even realizing it. Sitting in sessions, she allowed herself to cry, to admit anger, and to acknowledge the pain she had carried silently. Slowly, she started to understand the ways her parents' control had shaped her, and more importantly, how she could reclaim her life. New friendships began to form. Marley met Rowan Pike, a co-worker from the cafe she had been working at, and found in him a steady, encouraging presence. He didn't try to fix her or judge her past. He simply supported her in her goals and celebrated her small victories. Marley began to spend more time around people who uplifted her, neighbors she could trust, and friends who genuinely cared about her well-being. Each interaction reinforced that she wasn't alone, that she didn't have to bear the burden of her parents' manipulations anymore. With her financial independence secured, Marley began thinking about the future in ways she never had. She started saving with a clear purpose, a second property as an investment, a place she could grow into and eventually pass on or use as a stepping stone for greater freedom. Every deposit she made into her account felt like a tangible promise to herself, a reminder that she was in control of her own destiny. As Marley reflected on her journey, she realized how far she had come. She was no longer the scapegoat, the child whose dreams had been dismissed in favor of her sisters. She had fought, she had endured, and she had finally established a life that was hers entirely. This awareness brought a steady sense of pride and peace, replacing the anxiety and guilt that had once dominated her days. One morning, a letter arrived from her parents. Marley recognized the familiar handwriting instantly. She tore it open, expecting another round of guilt, manipulation, and demands. The contents did not disappoint. Her parents tried every tactic: reminders of past sacrifices, accusations that she was ungrateful, and veiled threats about the future. Marley read it carefully, then placed it in the recycling bin without a second thought. There would be no response. She had nothing left to prove to them. For the first time, Marley felt truly steady and grounded. She had a home she owned, a circle of supportive friends, and the knowledge that she could protect herself from anyone who tried to control her. She smiled quietly, a sense of calm settling over her like a warm blanket. This was her life now, fully her own, and for the first time, Marley felt at peace. Marley had spent months rebuilding her life, establishing boundaries, and finding peace, but one final step lingered in her mind. Her parents' relentless attempts to manipulate and control hadn't ended entirely, and she knew that as long as they were able to abuse legal loopholes, she could never feel completely safe. One evening, she made a decision. She would act, not out of spite, but out of a desire for justice and closure. Using a secure, anonymous channel, Marley tipped off the bank that her parents had submitted forged financial documents in Harlow's latest loan application. She provided copies of emails, records, and proof showing that they had attempted to manipulate the bank under false pretenses. She didn't feel fear or excitement, just a quiet determination that this final piece of their control needed to be exposed. Within weeks, the bank launched an investigation. Marley stayed out of the spotlight, letting the authorities handle the process. She continued documenting everything meticulously, knowing that clear evidence would protect her and prevent further manipulation. When the findings were released, it was undeniable. Her parents were held accountable for the forgery. Legal consequences followed, and Harlow's loan was immediately canceled. Marley's name, reputation, and financial security remained intact. Standing in her fully furnished home one afternoon, Marley paused in the living room, looking around at the space she had worked so hard to claim. Every corner reflected her choices, her independence, her care, and her taste. The house was hers in every sense, legally and emotionally. No threats, manipulations, or lies could take that away. For the first time in her life, she felt the full weight of autonomy, unbroken by the demands of others. As she walked through each room, Marley made a silent vow to herself. She would never allow her parents, or anyone else, to dictate her life again. Her peace, her home, and her choices were hers alone. The fear and guilt they had tried to instill for so many years had no place here. She wasn't acting out of revenge now. She was acting in alignment with her own values, ensuring that her life remained untainted by their chaos. Later, Marley went to the front door and turned the lock slowly. The click resonated deeply, almost like a heartbeat. It wasn't just a lock, it was a symbol. A final barrier between the life she had reclaimed and the toxic influence she had left behind. Every memory of betrayal, the manipulations, the lies, the threats, was behind that door. The house, her life, her safety, they were finally hers fully, without compromise. Marley chose peace over chaos, yet she didn't forget the lessons she had learned. The betrayal had shaped her, made her stronger, and taught her to protect herself. Standing in the quiet of her home, she felt a mixture of relief, strength, and clarity. Her family's influence had ended. Her independence had begun. And in that moment, locking the door, Marley finally closed the chapter on the toxic past, ready to live fully on her own terms. Do you think Marley made the right choice by cutting her parents out of her life completely? Or should she have tried to reconcile with them? Share your thoughts in the comments. I really want to hear what you think. And if you love stories about standing up for yourself and reclaiming your life, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story like this.